Good evening, everybody. It is February 13th, 2025. It is exactly 4 o'clock. This is the Finance Committee. I'm calling this meeting to order. This meeting will be video recorded and broadcast over local access channel 8 and through the town website at www.eastham-ma.gov. We do not have any minutes. I know Mira is on vacation, so we will be doing the minutes of our prior meeting and perhaps this one when we meet next week. So I'm moving on to item number 3 of the agenda, departmental budget meeting, and we have 2 famous people here with us today. Now, does everybody know? I'll let you to introduce yourselves because I'm not sure if you know everybody here.
Sure. My name's Adam Bohannon. I'm your police chief here in Eastham. And I have Dan Deschon with me. He's our deputy chief, and I'm going to ask him to speak in a minute on one specific topic that I wanted to touch on.
Okay. So we are, for people that are opening up their books, et cetera, we are doing the police today. And it's pages 98 to 109. If people are wanting to pull up their budget books.
And Mary, I'll just summarize before I turn it over to the chief. Up on your screen is the budget summary. Bottom line for the police department is their budget is up 3.73% from the prior year, about 3.5% salaries and a little almost just under 8% in expenses. But there's very specific reasons for some of these things that the chief can explain and Dan can explain. And I also just want to point out, because this will come into play next week with the DPW and natural resources, where I have to make some changes, but we did take animal control out of the budget for FY25, so you no longer see animal control in here, which is going to necessitate probably a couple of small additions to the natural resources budget when we talk next week. So, and then finally, I made a mistake that Roy Morelli was able to point out to me on the, I transposed a couple lines between a couple of officers, so I sent you a revised salary schedule. If anybody probably had picked up on that question, just if they had reviewed that page. Surprised I didn't pick it up, but luckily somebody did, so we made that fix. It doesn't change the bottom line in either case. So with that, I'll oh, one more thing, I'm sorry. And we did restate the FY25 budget. The original FY25 budget, as displayed in this book, doesn't tie to the warrant table, because the 4 new officers was a separate article. So that 300,000 is added into this FY25 budget to make it comparable from last year to this year. And I'll let the chief update you as to the status of those 4 spots. So with that, go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks for having us this afternoon. As I sat down to think about what I wanted to say today, I realized this is my 5th time sitting in front of the committee, and I think the last 4 times I've been in here telling you about staffing problems we've been having and projects that we need to accomplish. And I think I'm going to be able to report that we've come a long way this year on accomplishing some of those things and getting our staffing back up. When I sat here last year, we had just come through a very difficult fall of 2023, where we had a retirement, a resignation, and an officer injured. That fall was very difficult for our department, with forced overtime on all the officers, and I could see fatigue and the morale dipping a little bit due to all that. But in the spring last year, we were able to get the department back to the 17 full-time officers that we were staffed for or budgeted for at that time, which helped a lot. And then, as you know, the town graciously approved a $300,000 override at last year's town meeting to add 4 officers to our department. So far, since that vote, we've been able to add 3 of those 4 officers, not completely on the road working on their own yet, but in various stages of training. We did hire 1 person that was a transfer from another local department with several years of experience already under his belt. So that was a very easy training process for us, and he is currently working on the road now in Eastham on his own. We just had another officer graduate from the Plymouth Police Academy about 3 weeks ago. He's currently in our field training program, which is 9 weeks long, where he'll spend time with some of our other officers learning more specifically about our town and how we do things here at our department. So the end of April, is it? Yes. He'll graduate from his field training program, and he'll be fully trained to be out on his own. And we have a third officer in the brand new Cape Cod Police Academy right now. He's only a few weeks into that training. So he'll graduate just before the summer. He'll be in field training during the summer and be finished with his training around Labor Day. We are still looking to fill that fourth position. Hiring people can be challenging. We've been fortunate to find good people to come work on our department so far. We have a very, very strict process where many members of our department are involved in the initial interviewing process, along with our HR department, Lori Barr. We've kind of molded this process over the last few years, and it seems to be working for us. There's an extensive background investigation, physical fitness testing that needs to be done. And I would say, while we've been trying to fill these positions, we've dropped 3 to 4 people out of our process due to not being able to pass one of those standards. It's difficult to do that because you get a little bit down the road and you're looking forward to getting those people trained, but it's a necessity. We don't want to bring people here that can't meet our standards. So we're still trying to fill that fourth position. Our plan at this point was to kind of slow down, wait till the colleges graduate this spring. There may be a pool of individuals that are graduating that are looking for employment, and maybe hit everything again with advertising and hopefully get some good candidates in. Unfortunately, that, unless we find another transfer, that position won't be with us by the summer, but
I was wondering how that's going to affect your summer.
I mean, we're already up staff, so it's better than it was last summer. That fourth position will be probably a fall, winter training and get them ready for next spring and summer.
Chief, sorry to cut you off, but I just want to emphasize one point, because Fire Chief Lisa mentioned this last week, and I just want to reiterate, you kind of both have a similar approach, and it's more than just filling, vacant spots on a list of officers. A lot goes into finding the right person for Eastham. You might be the right person for another town, but if you're not the right person for Eastham, they have a whole consideration towards that aspect, and I think just commendable. That's all. I wanted to talk to that, and similar to what Lisa does at the fire.
Thank you. Yeah, we and I want to give Lori Barr a lot of credit, our HR director. She's been very, very helpful to us in recruitment, the hiring process, the interviewing process. And again, like Rich said, finding the correct person for us. We are blessed with a top-notch staff of police officers right now. They all get along. They're all pulling in the same direction. They're all working for the same goal. The last thing you want to do is hire someone into that group that rocks that boat. So as tempting as it is just to look for a body to fill a position, you have to trust the process, which in some cases you could be 2-3 months into the process and you have to stop, let that person go, start all over again, which is kind of the case that we've come to here. But in the long run, you're better off that way.
Has housing been an issue?
So housing has not been an issue for us yet. I would think it would be, but we've been fortunate enough to find people that have local roots. That's not saying we have a list of 20 people that have local roots that have housing that want to come work here, but we've been able to find one person each time we've advertised. The third person I mentioned that's in the police academy grew up in Eastham, went off Cape for a 17, 18-year career in the corrections department, and then wanted to come back, so has family here. So we've been able to find that person each time. But we are searching for that fourth person still, so I'll give you an update after that. But so far, we've been fortunate.
And if I could just follow up on that, not to do with the police department, but there's an article in the Independent this week regarding Provincetown Fire Department hiring. And this is the issue we talked about last week. The police department's a little bit different from the fire department in that they don't have emergency callback generally. And so housing and location of housing is much more important on the fire department if they're expected to have a response on and off duty hours. And that's exactly why Provincetown is increasing its staffing. Provincetown's an order of magnitude further than we are, so it's even more acute there. But
Are you finding that some police departments are giving signing bonuses? We were talking about that with the fire department last week as well. Apparently, places like Chatham, they're
some police departments are giving signing bonuses. With our transfer officer that had several years of experience, we were able to basically count his years of experience at his other job. It was a very nearby police department, so basically the knowledge was almost as much as if he just worked in Eastham for all those years. So it wasn't a signing bonus, but we were able to match years of service
For the
for
pay.
salary, for time off, that type of thing, which is enticing. Because of those increases in staffing, our total calls this year were up over 1,000 calls, from just over 16,000 last year to the mid 17,000s this year. And that's a product of just having more staff on the road doing law enforcement at any given time. So whether it's motor vehicle stops, whether it's, checking vacant businesses at 2 o'clock in the morning, checking beach parking lots, checking on broken down cars, there's more officers on the streets doing more work. So our numbers are up a bit from last year. Our traffic stops are up almost 700 traffic stops over last year, which I know is always on people's mind with Route 6. And that will continue to rise as we continue to
Increase.
add these 4 officers into their duties. And it actually should rise significantly, because it will give us some opportunities to assign officers specifically to traffic enforcement, rather than just trying to keep up with the calls that are coming in.
Excuse me.
Sure.
Is the revenue still going to the state for those traffic stops?
There's very little revenue from traffic tickets.
That stays in Eastham.
Correct. Just about everybody will appeal a traffic ticket. It goes to court. The court generally reduces the traffic ticket. And then it is, I think it's split 50-50 between the town, but usually you're splitting like $100, 50-50 between the town and the state. So
They don't take it all.
it drops very quickly. That could be from a $350 traffic ticket, though. It's reduced down to $100 and then split.
How do you feel about cameras for traffic enforcement?
Right now, they're not legal in the
I know
state,
that,
but
It seems like Healy is kind of moving in that
if
direction. in some
they
ways.
were, sure. I mean, we'll take every tool we can get to make the highway safer.
And does your officer have to show up at a court hearing in order for it to?
Yeah, yes. So the way the state works is the first appeal on a citation, we have a court officer. One of our detectives does our court prosecution. So she attends the first hearing,
Not the
not the
officer.
officer. If the clerk magistrate finds the person responsible, they have an option to appeal to a judge, and then the officer has to. So it costs us all that overtime as well to send those officers to those hearings.
Thank you.
Training continues to be a top priority for us. We want to develop the most professional, highly trained police department we can. There's always something new happening that some of us have never seen before. It seems like every day we're talking about something new, debating a law or a situation or how to handle something. So the more higher trained the officers can be, the better. Their yearly in-service consists of criminal law updates, motor vehicle law updates. This year, it's a segment on autistic individuals, special concerns for autistic individuals, operating under the influence refresher, use of force training, and CPR first aid training. Also in the use of force is continued training on de-escalation, which is a big topic right now. I'm sure some of you saw not too long ago, we had an incident in town where a vehicle came into town being followed by the state police. A gentleman got out of the vehicle armed with a handgun, was threatening the officers, and that was able to be brought to a peaceful resolution through de-escalation techniques, through negotiating, talking. So it's nice to see that training working.
Amazing.
It's, a lot of that is the training. Some of it is the decision-making of the individual in question, but in that case, it came to a very peaceful conclusion. So it's nice to see that. Our detectives continue to get specialized training. Our school resource officer is also a detective, so he gets a lot of training in juvenile law. We also just trained a new school resource officer, one of our female officers. She won't be assigned full-time as a school resource officer, but when our officer that's at the high school every day is out for a prolonged period of time, she is now certified to fill in for him. She also actually coaches lacrosse up at the school, so a lot of the kids
She
know
knows
her.
the students.
Yeah, and I think it's beneficial to have a female officer as well that can go up to the high school and interact with all the students. So that's very beneficial for us.
Does Eastham provide the resource officer for the high school all the time?
Yes. Yes, the school funds 50%.
So we get it back the other way.
Yeah, they do fund some of the salary for it.
They have one at the elementary school and everyone there?
So we don't have a full-time officer at the elementary school. We have an officer assigned as a liaison to the elementary school. She works the day shift, so she'll go over there almost every day, be with the kids, meet all the kids, play with the kids on the playground, and she's available to the school staff at any time for any questions or problems that arise. But we have an officer at the high school, just about every day that they're in session there.
Now, what does Dan do in the summer then, when the school goes, does he go into patrol?
He does. There's a good part of his summer that's taken up with planning and training with the school staff. So we try not to completely remove him from that because he does need some time to work with the school staff. Especially now with the high school under construction, there's a lot changing up there. So he'll go into the patrol staff for the month of July maybe, and then we start to ease him back into the school in August and give him time to be up at the school with the school staff.
How do you feel about the security at the high school that will be in place once it's completed?
I think it's good. We actually just did a drill there the other day. Obviously now, it's tough because of the construction that's happening. There's a lot of chaos happening up there right now. So they're doing the best they can with it. We just had a drill there the other day run by Detective Burnham and the school staff, and it went very well. The teachers are making the best that they can out of what's happening up there. It was nice to see how involved the staff was in invested in the drill, and the students as well. They take the drills very seriously and work hard to follow the directions, and hopefully, God forbid anything ever happened there, but it'll become just kind of second nature on what to do in an emergency. And I think it's headed in the right direction. It'll obviously become easier as the school construction
Yeah,
finishes
right.
and everything goes back to
Normal.
normal.
Are all your officers trained as to the new layouts up there and?
So- Yeah, we've done frequent, we've asked our officers to go up there with Detective Burnham frequently throughout the year and do walkthroughs so that they see the changes that are happening. We're hoping this summer to do a large scale training with our fire department on site at the high school once the school is somewhat finished. So that we really can get a good layout of the building and train in the building where we would need to respond. We've done the same at the elementary school the last 2 years as well.
Mary, Jerry has a question.
Yeah, Adam, when the school's finished, are we looking at restricting access to the campus in total for outsiders or people who don't have business at the high school? I mean, what's the view on security after the school is completed?
My understanding is that the school will almost be like the middle school is, where the buildings create kind of a barrier around the outside, and then there'll be a gate, if you will, although I think it'll be a larger gate where it'll be one point of entry and exit. And at that point of entry and exit, there'll be a school employee as well as Detective Burnham's office is very close to that entry point. So that people coming in and out will have to go through that
Check
one
in. I think they
point,
have to check in.
get a name tag, report what they're doing, and then the same thing on the exit. So I think the security will actually be much tighter than it was under the old system where those buildings were just so separate, you could walk in from anywhere.
Right, but the parking lots, for example, will be open. They won't be restricted for people coming in and off on the campus. This is really just looking at getting into the buildings.
Correct. The parking lots will still be open. Detective Burnham does patrol the area throughout the day, and he's actually, when you spend that much time at the school, he's pretty good at recognizing, I've never seen that vehicle before, or, he's done that quite a bit. So he does a pretty good job with securing the parking lot areas. And like I said, I think the school entry point is going to be a lot more secure than it was before.
Thanks.
Just a couple more things on training that have occurred over the last couple of years. Last year, we trained a new crash reconstructionist, which is 6 weeks of motor vehicle crash training. With the crashes we have on this road, it's good for us to have that deep level of knowledge on crash reconstruction and crash investigation. A lot of it involves technology now with the computers in cars. Drone photos are commonly used to measure car crashes now. So there's a lot to it. And we can't have everybody trained to that level of training. That would be all we would do, but it's good. Just knowledge of one is knowledge of all, right? So they go out, we have three people now that are full crash reconstructionists. And a lot of that training and knowledge comes back to the other officers to some degree. So kind of helps the whole department out.
Are there certain parts of the Route 6 that are the worst as far as crashes are concerned? Intersections?
Yeah, I mean, I think all your intersections would be the
Mhm.
places, and I think you'd find that on any highway like this. It's anytime you have to make decisions, right? Whether it's a traffic light or you're turning left, or that's where your mistakes and crashes occur.
Mhm.
So in Eastham, we have 3 traffic lights on Route 6, and then wherever some of the other busier points of entry and exit are. So, Old Orchard Road at Route 6, Massasoit Road at Route 6, there's a lot of traffic
Mhm.
coming and going from there. So that's, those are our points probably we have the most. We were actually talking this afternoon about some of the back roads and the crash.
Intersections?
Yeah, the crashes really though on the back roads are minimal and spread throughout the town. There's not really one problem spot that we could find, but on Route 6, I would say it's definitely the intersections, the traffic lights specifically.
Well, you did recommend, I'm assuming, that the the stop signs be put where Herringbrook and Bridge Road, and isn't there something to discuss down on Bridge Road down towards the water down there?
Yeah, so the stop signs at Bridge Road and Herringbrook were more because of the sightline issue there. When you come down, when you're heading towards Orleans on Herringbrook Road, you come to that stop sign, you almost had to turn your body
To left.
around. Short of redesigning and changing that intersection, that was the best way to solve that issue where you bring all vehicles to a stop and you bring them into an area where you can see each other
Yeah.
and then decide what
Who's
happens
going
next.
first?
So that was kind of a temporary fix to that intersection. Hopefully, there's several intersections in town that have been identified for potential renovation or alteration someday, to reconfigure and make them safer.
I just have to say, for whatever reason, I'm frequently coming from Samoset Road onto Route 6 from friends that live on the other side, on the Bay side and the library, et cetera. And I never, even when that light turns green for me from Samoset to Route 6, I never move because I can't tell you how many cars I have seen go right in front of Town Hall there, right through the red light, constantly.
I do that at every traffic light. When my light turns green, I look both ways.
Yes, yes.
And the visitor center is another place where they do it.
Because you
I'm
never
sorry?
know.
The visitor center, they run that light all the time.
Yeah, it's terrible.
I know, because I live on Herringbrook Road. You used to have to turn and literally, I think I had a bad neck.
Yes. Yes.
But I feel like, and my husband said it, I feel like it's actually slowed traffic down on the street because they have to stop. And I saw so many near misses.
Yeah.
Accidents.
Yes.
It's scary.
Because the road was the same going, the tar was the same going
Yes.
from Bridge to, so
Yes.
people thought they stopped on Bridge and
Mhm.
you got a lot of bang for buck, I think.
Yeah.
Bang for buck with that stop sign.
That pavement didn't help us,
Yeah.
from the water project when it was repaved.
Oh,
They
yeah.
went- They went north on Bridge
Bridge
Road
Road.
and then left onto Herringbrook in the same path, so it looked like that was all one road where it's not, so that didn't help us, but I'm glad to hear that, because I actually don't travel over there a lot, I live on the other end of town, so I'm glad to hear that someone that uses the intersection a lot, it's working. One thing we've done recently with training too is we've been trying to send a lot of our sergeants obviously get a lot of supervisor and leadership training, but we've been trying to extend that a little bit to our more senior police officers who are in charge of our shifts at times. The more leadership, the more experience and training we have in these officers that can be running a shift or mentoring younger officers, the better it makes the whole department. So 2 of our senior officers actually just finished some training today based on leadership and conducting yourself in a way while other officers are learning and watching from you. So that goes a long way to help us as well. We talked a little bit about the schools, and we do train at the schools. We train at the elementary school this summer, and we hope to go back to the high school this coming summer with the new layout and bring the fire department in as well, which we've been in discussions with them about, and they're on board for, so we can all train together. Our overtime budget, that's always a hot topic. I wanted to touch on that. I have some good news about that this year, actually, as we've been back to a full complement and we've added some staff in. Just a quick comparison. Last year, between July 1st and this time of the year, we had spent $193,000 in overtime, and Over 90% of that is just simply to keep a minimum number of police officers on patrol at one time. This year, between July 1st and today, we've spent $149,000 on overtime. So $45,000 or $6,000 less this year. So we project coming in significantly under budget on overtime this year. You know, things can happen, obviously. Officers can get injured, somebody could leave. We could have some major winter storms that cost us a lot of money, but so far so good on the overtime this year, and we're obviously more than halfway through the fiscal year.
If you had had the other additional person, how do you think that would have affected your overtime?
So the idea with the additional staff is to increase the number of officers that we have working. So I don't like to talk about minimum numbers we have working in a public meeting just for tactical reasons. But if we had, just hypothetically, if we had 4 officers on every shift and that was our minimum number, the idea now would be to go one more to 5. Those are not our numbers, but
Yeah.
so we do anticipate still spending overtime money on keeping that minimum manning at a higher level now than it was before. However, during some of our very slow months in the winter, you know, later in December, January, February, early March, we may allow that minimum manning to drop a little further. So that may help us with some overtime in that area. So that's going to be a little bit of a work in progress as we continue to add people. And, you know, we're not at that. We have not added that 4th officer yet
Right.
to allow us to kind of, you know, play with that and see how that comes out. So I could probably give you more information about that next year.
Next year,
after we
yeah,
have a chance with it.
I was gonna say, Mary, this year we held the overtime line level.
Yeah, the 300.
anticipating
Yeah.
That the chief and I were gonna have to review that for next year to adjust it with the new staffing level once everybody's on board. The key thing though is, you know, one of the biggest drivers for overtime, it's true in the fire department and in the police department. It's a little bit different, but you know, when you had a couple years ago, when you had a officer injured on duty, that's a big driver of overtime. That's when we tend to run up against it and have problems. So, or vacancies for that matter.
Yeah,
We have the monies for injured on duty. We have the monies in the budget for that.
It's in his overtime.
Right,
So if
right.
someone's injured on duty and he has to fill that shift with another officer, that's officer's paid overtime, it comes out of the overtime line.
The other change with overtime with more staff is there's more training requirements, more court time, more report writing time that the officers need to do. So there's a little bit of an increase in overtime there. We may save a little bit and actually covering our shifts. So we'll see how that balances out through the year.
Mary, did Ron, do you have a question?
Yeah, just item of curiosity, when there's
Excuse me, Ron.
No, it was on.
You're on.
okay, sorry, when there's private detail work for Eversource or whomever, I take it doesn't go through the budget?
That has nothing to do with the budget. That's private detail work. So if it's for Eversource, Eversource is paying that bill. Verizon's paying that bill.
We do have what's called an agency fund or an account. So we pay the officers their pay for details out of that account, and it gets reimbursed by a billing. The police bills Eversource or whomever, and then the money goes in, and eventually it washes out to zero.
Some projects that we're working on right now. Body cameras. I talked about body cameras last year. We had a capital item for this current year of $50,000 to implement a body camera program. When we were about to pull the trigger on that, a grant opportunity came out for body cameras. So we pressed pause, backed off a little bit, researched the grant. And I'm happy to report we were approved for $134,000 body camera grant through the Executive Office of Public Safety, which will implement our body camera program and pay for it for the next 5 years completely. So we'll have to, Rich and I will discuss at that point what comes next after those 5 years, but that gives us a nice period of time where actually just before we walked over here, FedEx walked in the door with all of our new body cameras. So they're at the station. It'll take us a few months to do the IT work and get them deployed and get comfortable with them. But by summer, we should be fully operational with body cameras.
And do you have dash cam in the cruisers?
We do not. That was something we discussed. The body camera companies make dash cameras as well. You can get them as a package, clearly more money. We decided that it would be more beneficial for us to have a body camera for each officer so that no matter who's working at any given time, they each have their own camera and they can use those cameras in the cruisers as you know, if they have a prisoner in the car, they can leave the body camera on, record conversations, record interactions. We just decided this was a better way for us to go now.
Are they all leased?
I'm
Are the cameras leased or do you purchase them? or-
It's a 5-year contract with Motorola.
Mhm.
So after, I think it's 2.5 or 3 years, they replace them with the newer technology cameras. And it's all included in that package.
And do they manage the data?
They do, yep.
They
So
host the data?
correct, yep. So we don't have to worry about that either. Little bit more work for us as we start to amass footage. We're gonna have requests for the footage, whether it's from court or citizens, which is gonna require, you know, redaction work. And so this is gonna be a learning process for us to see how much time it actually takes us, how many requests we actually have.
Actually creates more work almost.
It does.
Yeah, yeah.
But we don't know how much really. We'll see. Some other departments have reported that they fully deployed body cameras and really hadn't had that many requests at all for it. So we'll see how it goes.
Mhm.
It's gonna be different this year, you know, with that,
Yeah.
especially for court cases. I think we're gonna see constantly OUI arrests, for example. They're gonna want the body camera footage. So
Mhm.
a little more work for our court officer, our records clerk, but we'll see how that goes over the
It'll
year.
make the job better, you think?
I'm sorry?
Make the job better?
Yes, when I started working here, 23, 24 years ago, nobody wanted to work on camera, right? Like that was I don't want to go to work every day and have a camera on me. Now the officers are asking for the cameras. They want them. It shows the good work that they do on camera.
I think it'd be helpful for situations to show exactly what happened.
Correct. Writing reports, it's easier for that. It's all on camera.
Mm.
You don't have to remember what somebody said. It's recorded.
So they can go back and actually replay it.
In certain situations, yes. Some of the more serious, we had an officer involved in a shooting, God forbid. There's more strict policy on that as far as writing reports, but in most situations, they're allowed to go back and view it. So the officers are asking for the cameras now. They want them.
Nice.
Cuts out,
Mm.
you know, if we had a complaint about an officer, it's on camera. Let's just look at the tape. And for the most part, that helps them. So they're looking forward to it. Do you have something?
Yeah, what was the annual cost that we're saving that we're gonna have to put into a budget 6 years from now? Is it 25, 30,000?
Something like that. I don't remember the exact number. Yeah, I want to say 30,000.
The chief's budget was gonna go up by that amount additionally, but
Mm.
we were able to take
Mm.
that out. But just putting you on notice 5 years from now.
No, but I have a question because you say the grant is for gives you the body cameras for 5 years.
Correct.
And then Motorola is going to give you new ones at the end of 5 years or
No,
I
so-
didn't understand what.
And we see this a lot with our dispatch equipment, as well. The contract, because the technology changes so fast.
Yeah.
Right, and
Have to
these
keep-
cameras are gonna be out in the snow and the
Yeah.
wind and at all hours of the day.
They're not going to last forever.
They're inevitably gonna get dropped. They take wear and tear. So most of these longer contracts with equipment or technological equipment include a replacement of it during the contract. So about halfway through the contract, they update the equipment with the newest, latest, greatest
Update,
technology and new equipment. So it should ensure that we have reliability out of the equipment for us.
But at the end of 5 years,
At the end of the 5 years, then it's similar to our tasers we do now. We sign a 5-year lease for the tasers or a 5-year contract for the tasers. And at the end of it, we need to, sign another contract for 5
Contract.
years. So we'll do the same thing with the body cameras.
so that would be an expense that.
That's an
That-
expense that,
that
like
would-
Esberts was saying.
the
that we'll
budget
pick up
in 5 years.
We've given a 5-year reprieve to that.
Right, right.
A couple other grants we received this year, 911, and we're going to talk about 911 and dispatch in a couple of minutes, but $6,500 emergency medical dispatch grant, which pays for, we have to have a doctor that supervises our emergency medical dispatch program. That's typical for every 911 answering point. So that covers that. $33,000 in support and incentive grant money from 911, which covers some supplies that our dispatch office needs for everything from toner and paper to could be, we did a printer last year, things like that. And then the remainder of those funds go in to cover our dispatch salaries and overtime to supplement that. $9,200 in training from state 911 for our dispatchers. And that's it from 911. So state 911 provides a good amount of money to train our dispatchers to the standards that they themselves require. So.
Does somebody have a listing of your grants that you've just riddled off a couple of them. I think it's information that we should have
Sure.
in a listing of
I can
the
give that to
grants
you.
themselves.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I can give it to you.
thank you.
Just a couple other smaller grants we got this year. A $6,500 road safety grant, which pays overtime to put additional patrols on the road for traffic enforcement, as well as some equipment. This year, we bought a portable breathalyzer that goes out in our cruisers that can be used for OUI traffic stops. But the majority of that is spent on overtime to put additional patrols out. A lot of that is on holiday weekends, things of that nature. And we got a $2,500 car seat grant this year. We have a few officers on our department that are certified car seat installation.
I mean, I think you've advertised, people can come in and have their,
Yeah.
put
and
them
this-
in properly.
The grant allows us to purchase car seats so that if people don't have their own safe car seats, we provide them with a new one and install it for them at the station. Takes up a lot of room in our supply closet.
You're not in there sitting on them?
Before I get into talking about dispatch, I'm going to ask Deputy Chief Deshawn to talk about state accreditation. I mention that every time I come here, and it's kind of that thing that's been hanging over us for the last few years. We've been a certified agency under state accreditation, and we are just about to become, knock on wood, a fully accredited police agency. And he spent about 10 years of work on getting us to this point on this. So I'm going to ask him to introduce that and talk about what's to come with accreditation.
Sure. Just for people that aren't familiar, accreditation, it's a self-initiated process that the department decides to undertake, in which the department strives to meet a bunch of standards, but not only meet the standards, you have to show that you maintain those standards and follow them. The standards are set by the Massachusetts Accreditation Commission. And like the chief said, there's two levels of accreditation. There's certification and then full accreditation. I started working on it in 2014, and our agency became certified in 2016. And to get certified, you basically have to meet 155 mandatory standards. And the standards themselves, like I said, they're created by the commission. Some of them are one line, like you have to show that your officers take an oath of office. But some of the standards are 7 pages of use of force trainings and different things. And the big thing about accreditation is it's one thing to just have a policy. Any department can have a policy. You can take a list of model policies and put them out. But if the officers aren't following those policies, or if the administration isn't making sure that the tasks in the policies are being completed, then what's the point of really having the policies? So what accreditation does is they send out teams of assessors to come and assess your department. And so they will review the policies to see if they meet the standards, and then you have to provide proofs of compliance for each one of the standards as well. So in 2000, like I said, in 2016, we were certified on those 155 standards, which the certification, those are the high liability standards. It's things like,
You have to meet every one of those, or is it, you get a certain points out of all of them?
no, for certification, you have to meet all 155.
Oh,
And then you're recertified every 3 years. So we were recertified again in 2019 and then again in 2022, which 2022 is when the chief came to me and asked, what would it take for us to get fully accredited? What would that entail? Is it even possible for our department? At the time when he asked in 2022, there was 2 other agencies on Cape Cod that were fully accredited. So we kind of talked about it. I might have resisted a little bit.
It's a miracle he didn't quit, actually.
That's right.
But then in 2022, I started working on that. And for full accreditation, you have to meet the 155 standards of certification that we were already meeting, an additional 119 mandatory standards. And then there's optional standards, like you were speaking of before, that are based on the size of your agency. So with our size, we had to meet 55 more optional standards. So it's a total of 340 standards. So in April, we have an assessment team consisting of 3 assessors and a facilitator coming to the department to do a 3-day assessment of all of those standards to make sure that we meet all of those. For us to prepare for it, it's been me kind of preparing in the background, getting a lot of the policies to fit the standards, making sure we have the compliance. And then we've run our own in-house assessment, which we had all 4 of our sergeants participate in, our 2 detectives and a couple officers. And that really helped our department because it got kind of buy-in from everybody. It made them realize when I'm sending these annoying emails asking for different forms and stuff, kind of why I was asking for them. It kind of gave them all an understanding of the process. And then we held a mock assessment, which was other assessors from the area came and did kind of an informal assessment for us. We did that last month. They identified a couple things that I need to work on, but nothing, knock on wood, that'll be too challenging. And then in April, we'll have those 3 assessors come and the facilitator. And it's also something I've been working on it. Like I said before, I started accreditation in 2014. In that time, I became an assessor. So I actually go to other departments and do their assessments, which benefits us a lot because
So you
I'm
can
able-
see.
yeah, I'll go and I'll be like, oh, I like that form that they have, or I like the way they do this with their property or something. I can bring that stuff back to our agency. So, yeah, hopefully next year when the chief comes and talks to all of you, he'll be able to tell you that we are fully accredited. And we've been lucky that like I said, we got a lot of buy-in from our department. Some departments have faced some resistance from the unions. There's a lot of trainings that are required by accreditation that are addition to what's required by the state. It's more work for the officers. There's more forms that need to be completed, more boxes that need to get checked. And we haven't had any resistance from anybody on our staff. They've all been on board with it, and it's made it a lot easier for me. Like, so.
Just the pursuit is making your department better, I would think.
100%.
Yeah.
I think the officers like it because it's almost like the body cameras. It spells out exactly what they need to do. So there's certain calls that they don't deal with a lot. You know, a kidnapping, for example. Like you might deal with 2 of those in your career, right? An actual kidnapping. You can open the policy, and the policy is written to the Mass Police Accreditation Standards, and it tells you exactly what you need to do as far as who to notify and who to call and what, reports you need to write. And so they like that direction. It's clear for them. Especially like I said, in the areas where they're not calls we're getting every day.
So what's the advantage other than saying we've done it? What's the advantage to the department?
I think the advantage to the department is we know that we have the best practice policies in Massachusetts for policing, which should make us a very professional police department. And it should, in my view, lower our liability of being sued, creating, situations where officers might be making those mistakes because we have those policies in place. They've been forced to read them. They've been forced to train on them. And a lot of this, as the deputy was saying, is you can't just put the policy out and forget about it and say we're accredited. Every year we have to review these things. Many of the high liability ones have to go back to the officers every year for review, roll call trainings. When we're doing a lot of our other hands-on trainings, a lot of these policies come into play during those trainings. So I think we're reducing our overall liability. I was actually just on the phone with Lori Barr today. I had to fill out a couple forms for her for our insurance renewal. And I suggested that once the deputy finishes this process and we get accredited, it's worth reaching out to the insurance company with our certificate and saying, we're an accredited police agency. Is there any break in that for us? I don't know the answer to that question, but it's worth asking.
Probably not, but
But it's worth asking.
it's worth asking. But I guess from my perspective, addition to everything the chief just said, I'm the finance director, so I have a financial perspective, a financial lens. I look through this, and we got to go to town meeting, and it makes me feel good when I present the budgets to the finance committee and to the select board, that the community gives us a lot of money for all our departments, but they give us a lot of money for the police department, and they're getting a very professional organization and force, and they're the best that they can be. So, that's all you can ask for, in my opinion. Right? They're doing a good job, and they're being the highest standards of the profession, and you would expect them. We're paying them, we're paying contributing a large amount of our property tax dollars for a professional police department. And that's what we got. So, Mary Jerry had a question.
Yeah, Jerry?
Yeah. Mary, I was going to ask the question you did, but I'll just ask one other twist. Do we get a leg up in any grant application
that's what
because
I
we're
was
going to
gonna
be
ask too.
fully accredited?
Yeah.
It's funny you say that because we were just talking about this last week. I actually think the answer is no, but I think the answer is we should.
Yeah.
This accreditation process is not easy. It's very complicated. I mean, he spends, I don't know, a couple hours a day working on this. So there should be more of an incentive to do this, I think. And it would push other departments into it. but there's not right now.
Mhm.
I've never seen a grant opportunity that has the contingency of being accredited.
It has helped with some stuff. Like 3 or 4 years ago with a lot of police reform going on. The federal government came out with your use of force policies had to contain a certain number of standards in them to be eligible for federal grants. And since we were already in the accreditation process, we didn't have to make any changes to our policies. We just sent them in and automatically qualified, whereas other departments would have to rewrite some policies and make some changes.
Would it help with the hiring?
I think so. I was actually just gonna say that. I think that our officers take pride in this. It's a
I would think so.
It's a high standard to meet, and once we've met it, they take pride in it. And I would think that people that are looking for a place to work and in 2025, if you're a officer that, you know, doesn't have any baggage with you, you can take your pick really of where you want to work because everybody's hiring. I would think that that's a bonus point for us that we're an accredited agency.
Yeah, I would think so.
So
Well, good luck in April.
Thank you.
Before the chief moves on to dispatch, I just want to share the expense budget real quick and run through some numbers.
yeah, I was gonna hit on that, but
Okay.
you
Well, I got it on the screen now.
Okay. The areas I wanted to touch on, which I think are the majority of our increases, basically all of the increases in our expense budget come directly back to the hiring of 4 more officers. So, for example, our clothing allowance, budget went up about $6,000. That's because we have 4 more officers that contractually receive a clothing allowance, and even if it wasn't contractual, we need to put uniforms on them. The taser lease went up about $3,000. That's because we had to add 4 more tasers to the department and increase that lease. $4,500 increase in the training budget because we have 4 more officers now that we need to give in service and specialized training to every year as well. I think there was a small increase in some of the software expenses, which happens every year, but the vast majority of the increases come right back to those 4 officers that we put on the department. So I'm happy to answer any specific questions about that.
Well, I just want to say that the chief had some other increases that at the time not that it's up to me necessarily,
It is
but
on hold.
kind of held them back at bay a little bit with the promise that we'd be revisiting this next year when we got everything sorted and settled out. We knew we were coming into this year with a tight budget, and it looks like we are coming in where we need to be, independent of the district, which I'll update you on that in later on in the meeting. So, just so you know, we'll have things that we'll have to address next year. And I also want to point out on page 106, we did put in there a line item for the body camera lease, 27.5, but then you see below coming out. I just don't, we try to use this document as a way for succession planning as well, for whether it's the chief or myself or anybody else, the finance committee members. You're seeing it there and you're seeing it coming out and keep track of these things so that when they come up, you can address them.
So, my only question, chief, is do your officers have all the safety equipment that they need?
They
You
do.
feel?
They do. And I should have mentioned this before. I think that one of the reasons we've been successful with recruitment and retention of officers, because we were talking about this, we talk a lot, but we think we're doing well with retention of staff as well at this point. We don't see any, we might be the next 2 to retire, which is going to be a while if you'll have us. We don't see anyone that's getting ready to leave our department. We think that most of the people that are here for a while. Anything can change, obviously, but, and I think a lot of that comes back to, a lot of the credit of that goes to the officers themselves. They've created a culture where they all enjoy working together. They want to be there. But it also partially comes back to the equipment that they have. We've, I think, over the last few years through Rich's equipment replacement plan, vehicle replacement plan, we've amassed a lot of very good quality equipment. I always talk about the vehicles. A lot of us go to work and sit at a desk. The officers go to work and they sit in their police car. That's their office. That's their desk. It needs to be the best equipment. It needs to function properly so that it can get to your house in an emergency. And we've been able to work through the last few years and getting that equipment and those vehicles to a very high standard. And I think that that's maybe a small piece, but that's a piece in recruitment and retention of officers here.
And keeping them safe.
Exactly.
And I just want to reemphasize that point because, try to hit the key points when you can. But, we've had this discussion before, but, most of the credit goes to the chief and his department and his staff. but it all fits together. And every little small piece contributes to the larger whole. And you'll see a lot of towns where I'll call it nickel and dime departments to get to a certain budget target that's artificial and it's not real. And you're just digging yourself a hole. And so I like to commit, I think it's been our approach, and the finance committee's been supportive, and the select board's been supportive, and the town meeting has agreed that that's the way to go. And I think you see that it pays dividends in the long run. So just maintaining that long-term perspective and making sure everybody needs what they need, has what they need. And, there might be a time when we can't do that, but then that's on me to come up with an alternative strategy that gets us through that period. So thank you.
I have a bunch of questions. As far as Victoria Wagner is concerned, her income went up 34%.
So there was an error there.
Mary, that was a sheet I emailed.
I didn't see your email.
Let
I'm
me
sorry.
bring it on screen just so you can see it.
She actually did go up.
Is this the copy that you made?
She did go up significantly this year. It's actually about 9.5%. And the reason for that is she obtained her master's degree, which is an increase. So,
Actually, I don't have it to put on the screen, but the officer that went down
Yeah,
significantly
two people went down, yeah.
was should have been the Wagner salary. I reversed them.
Okay, because that looked questionable to me.
There was one other who went down by like 1%. That was,
Was that Rivera?
Reveruzzi.
Rivera?
Was Reveruzzi,
Reveruzzi?
was he in that spot at that time, chief?
Yeah, he's showing us.
It might have just been when he came in, it might have been the previous vacant slot, so it might have been budgeted, but it might not have specifically been him.
That's probably what it was.
But that name's assigned to that prior year line.
Okay. And I have a couple of other questions on Narcan. Is that, where can people find that? How is that divvied out to the town, or say the library, council on aging, or your own officers? How is that?
So our officers carry, every one of our automatic external defibrillator cases have Narcan in it. So when our officers go to calls of an unconscious person, they have all that with them. So that's one side of it. I know the health department was working on a program to provide Narcan to the community free of charge. I don't know exactly where that stands. I know the library, the town hall, in our station lobby, there's a box on the wall that has free Narcan in it for people to take. I don't know how far that's gone into other departments in town. I actually helped them put together the boxes for it, and so they can get them out. So I don't know the answer to that exactly, but I know the intention was to get it out into all town buildings for people.
And would people know how to use it? I mean, I've never used it. I just didn't know whether, say I was at the library and it's something that would be helpful. I don't know how it.
There's instructions that come with it. Obviously, in a crisis situation like that, it's tough to be fumbling with instructions, but I think I've seen community training on that for not for first responders, but for the average citizen. I'm sure you could find something online.
They're a lot easier to use.
Yeah,
now
it's really
than they
not
used to be.
complicated.
Okay.
Yeah,
Just.
It almost looks like a nasal spray, and it goes in your nose.
It goes in your nose.
And
Okay.
So it's pretty simple, but.
Okay.
That's a good comment, Mary. I'll follow up with Jackie and the chief and the fire chief. It might not a bad idea, not only the Narcan, but also AEDs, just so people are familiar. We do have AEDs, and I think almost all
Yeah,
town
I know
buildings.
that we have one at the library.
So just to make sure people are comfortable in the event that they might have to use one.
We have an AED and CPR instructor on staff. I'm sure the fire department as well, so we could even provide training to other staff if needed.
And I have another question. I know, unfortunately, with the immigration issues that we're dealing with these days, a letter was sent out to all the parents of the children in the Nauset Regional School System. How are you involved in anything that might involve ICE or immigration issues that we're dealing with, unfortunately, right now?
So we have not had any communication with ICE or any other federal agency regarding immigration, whether it was before the election or after the election. So nothing's really changed for us, and this is not something we encounter very often. Our officers are not asking people their immigration status. In fact, I asked a couple of them, I had another meeting about something similar. I asked a couple of them what they were seeing on the street, and they all kind of looked at me like, we're just going about our business and we're not seeing it. if we were to be contacted by ICE or any other federal agency, our level of involvement would depend on the situation. So if hypothetically, if they were coming to Eastham looking for someone that had committed a violent crime, we would assist with that because we're looking for someone that committed a violent crime. It doesn't really matter to me what their immigration status is.
Yeah,
We're
it's
looking
a
for
crime
violent
aspect.
crime. If it's simply on immigration status, then the police department will play no role in that. Other than if it becomes a public safety risk, if there becomes, starts to become a riot or a gathering or it turns into something deeper than what was originally reported. Depending on the situation, we may or may not get involved, but simply for immigration status alone, our police department has no authority to enforce that. And we won't be involved in enforcing it.
Do you have any idea how many undocumented people we have in town?
I have no idea.
No.
No idea. And again, that's not something we ask people.
Oh, no.
We want people to feel comfortable coming into our department and reporting crimes, asking for help regardless of their immigration status. When we're stopping cars on the street, we're stopping you for speeding. You're speeding. It doesn't matter whether what your immigration status is to us at that point. So that's really where we're at with it. And again, we've talked about it more in meetings than we've actually dealt with it on our everyday work. It's just not something that we're seeing in our everyday as we go about our business.
Because I was just wondering if somebody ICE came to our elementary school, would they, they have a protocol. I have the letter that was sent to all the parents. Would they be in touch, would the school be in touch with you, or how would that work?
I would imagine so. I did speak with the superintendent about this a couple of weeks ago. My recommendation was her to talk to her legal counsel about what the school was or was not required to do.
Have you seen the letter that they sent to
I
this?
have not, no.
I have a copy of it.
Okay, yeah, I'll take a look at it. But again, this has not come across our radar. That's not to say it won't someday, but we haven't seen it yet.
Do we have homeless people in town?
We have. Typically more in the warmer months. We'll find, get a complaint about someone sleeping in a tent out on the bike trail or something like that. But I wouldn't say it's a, overwhelming problem here in our community. If there's no more questions about the police department, I'm going to transition to communications.
Can I ask one question?
Sure.
What do you think is your biggest challenge for the coming year?
It's a great question. I think filling that fourth position with a quality officer is definitely something we need to work on. We've had some challenges with our facility, honestly. Had some HVAC challenges, which I know we have in the pipeline to be fixed. We've got some issues with windows. Our facility was built in 1989, so it's showing its age. Not saying it needs to be completely replaced, but we need to have a plan to keep it functional. Seems like the air conditioner always breaks in the summer and the heat always breaks in the winter. But we're working forward on that. But that has been enough of an issue where I'd say that'll be a challenge going forward, is keeping the facility maintained and functioning. One of our rooms in the station that we use to bring victims of crimes in when they come in, it was like 46 degrees the other day because the heat wasn't working properly. That's since fixed, but just keeping the facility up and running, and I would say, filling our staff out to where it needs to be and maintaining that.
Okay. Thank you. How many drones do you have?
How many what?
Drones do you have?
Drones.
One drone.
Okay.
That's assigned to our crash reconstructionists. And that is the newest way to measure, if you will, a crash scene that needs that level of reconstruction or investigation. The deputy chief's actually a crash reconstructionist, and when he was doing it, it was with the old tape measure from a telephone pole. And I used to get what I called the dumb end of the tape measure. It was the 0. He got the other end that knew what he was doing with it. But that takes a lot longer. We have to close roads. It's a lot more dangerous. So with the drone, we could take an overhead photo, put in a couple of measurements, and through technology, be a lot safer and quicker with that.
Last question. Does every officer carry a taser?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Before the chief starts, I'm just gonna put the dispatch budget on the screen so you can see it, and you'll be watching this, we'll see it. Here's the summary page. There's been really no changes in this budget, although some changes in circumstances, I'm sure the chief will talk about. So we still have the same level of staffing, and the contractual obligations of that staff, brings salaries up 2.69%. And, we left the expense budget level, so no increase there. So total 2.65 total increase, $474,000 for our dispatch. Oh, sorry, I forgot to turn my microphone on. And then here's your salary schedule, and here's your expense. Again, no change. So with that, I'll let the chief talk about some of his dispatch issues.
So we have some big changes coming in the next month or so with our dispatch facility or our dispatch service. In the mid-80s, we as a town, as a community, took over the dispatching and the emergency call answering. And I say emergency call answering because I'm not even sure if 911 was a thing when that started in the mid-80s. But we used to have an emergency number here in town, and then whenever 911 came in, the model we've used since the mid-80s until now is that there's one person working in a room in the police department. The 911 phone rings, they answer the 911 phone. They're responsible for providing what's called emergency medical dispatch. So they are trained to provide information about how to stop bleeding or give CPR or help someone that's choking. They're trained to give that information over the phone. So they're required to do that. And then their job is also to dispatch the police department or the fire department and the fire department, depending on what resources are needed for whatever emergency that's occurring. It also goes a little further than that. They may get into dispatching the DPW, the health department, the building department, the electrical inspector, depending on what the situation is and what we need. As you might imagine, since the mid-80s, things have changed technologically. We've put a lot more pressure on our dispatchers, where we've come to a point where it's just too much work for one person. They get very quickly overwhelmed. And we could get, if we have a major car crash or a major incident happen, we could take 12 to 15 911 calls about that same incident. And they have to answer them all, because if they don't answer them all and one is something different, then we have a problem. So imagine that happening, and then you're trying to provide emergency medical dispatch, and then you're trying to talk to the police department on the radio, and you're trying to talk to the fire department on the radio, and now you're trying to call the DPW. And that's for one incident. And then imagine if there's another incident that occurs at the same time, which does happen. So we identified this problem many years ago, and one of the solutions was the Barnstable County Sheriff's Office offers a service where they will answer your 911 phone for you and provide dispatch for your fire department, and then you provide dispatch for just your police department. The town of Eastham has been trying for years to get a spot in that system with the sheriff's office, and we were told for many years that they didn't have the space. They were trying to build a new building, and once they were able to expand, we would be one of the first ones in. We realized we kind of came to the conclusion that wasn't happening fast enough. We didn't know when it was going to happen. So we entered into a study about building a Lower Cape regional dispatch facility with Provincetown, Truro, Wellfleet, and Eastham, where we would do essentially the same thing, but do it on our own here on the Lower Cape. We got through the feasibility study part of that, and we were actually given a 911 grant to start the architectural and design phase of a project like that. While all that was happening, we were contacted by the sheriff's department and given the option to come on board with them, which is what we have decided to do.
Just Eastham.
Just Eastham. Well, Provincetown was also invited. Chatham was invited at a different level, but our decision was to go on board with the sheriff's department. And a big part of that decision was that building our own facility here in the Lower Cape would have taken a lot of time. We're talking 5, 6, 7 years probably down the road to make something like that happen. And in the meantime, we're still working with a model that we know doesn't work and could go south at any moment. It could be. We basically set these dispatchers up, and I want to be clear, the dispatchers do a phenomenal job. They are very good at what they do. There's a lot of stuff they do that I wouldn't want to do. If an emergency call comes in, I want to go help deal with it. I don't want to sit behind the phone. I'd feel like I wasn't doing enough. They do a great job with that, with the stress that they have with people that are having the worst day of their life on the other end of the phone. So this isn't about a quality of work. This is just about a volume of work. We've overwhelmed that one person.
And just to be clear, we've got 5 salaried dispatchers.
Yes.
and we're 24/7 service, so
Yeah.
it's one person. It requires four to have 24/7 coverage, which is pretty thin, and we've got the fifth, so.
And actually, that's a good point, because if we were to try to solve this problem here, just in our community ourselves, the solution would be to double our dispatch staff and have fire dispatchers and police dispatchers, which would obviously be very expensive. We don't really have the space for it, so there's a whole nother set of problems there. So we've entered into a contract with the Barnstable County Sheriff's Office on March 17th, 2025. They will become our primary answering point for our 911 service. For the common 911 caller, you won't even notice a difference. They'll answer the phone just like we do. You know, with technology nowadays, they're dispatching our fire department as well from Bourne at their office, but it's just like you're sitting next to each other with the technology we have now. The town of Eastham should notice no difference when you're calling 911, and in fact, it will be a much higher level of service, because we will now have our current dispatchers will be dispatching just for the Eastham Police Department, and the sheriff's office will be answering our 911 and dispatching for our fire department. The benefit of that is, if we have that multiple incidents occur at the same time, if we have, 13 911 calls about one incident, there are, the town of Brewster may not be busy at that moment, and the dispatcher that's assigned to the town of Brewster at the sheriff's department can jump over and help the dispatcher that's assigned to the town of Eastham. So they have backup in the same room with them to help deal with any given situation that occurs where we don't. Usually it's me or the deputy jumping out of our office, running into the dispatch center, trying to help answer those calls and get those units dispatched, if we're there. So that is due to happen on March 17th. All indications are that we're on target for that. And again, I think that unless you're someone that calls 911 every day and knows exactly the voices you're hearing on the other end of the phone, you shouldn't even notice a difference. It'll be a flawless transition, and the level of service should go up.
But if somebody calls 911 and it's a police matter,
Mhm.
how does that get routed?
Get to
Yeah,
the
so-
police.
So right now, when we answer 911, we say 911, this line is recorded, where's your emergency? Because we know we're Eastham and we're just dispatching it here.
Right.
What they're gonna say now is 911, this line is recorded, do you need police, fire, or EMS? If it's fire or EMS, they're gonna handle that. They're gonna provide that emergency medical dispatch the fire department. If it's a police matter only, they're gonna gather basic information and then transfer that call to the Eastham Police Department, where our dispatchers will then take it over.
But if it's a bad accident, we
You need
dispatch
more
the
than
fire
one thing.
department and the police department. What happens then?
So the police dispatchers will monitor the fire department radio still, so they will hear that
Mhm.
dispatched. And then they'll dispatch the police department. We have some procedural things to kind of work through here, but in general, that's how that will work.
So eventually will they take on police as well, or will that always be separate?
There's some discussion that after they build their new building, which we don't know when that's gonna be, that they may dip their toe in dispatching police as well.
They do police for other.
No, They don't do any
They just
police right now.
strictly fire.
Strictly fire and 911 answering.
Fred, that's kind of the issue that, I'll jump the head a little bit, but that's going to be the issue for us to figure out over the next few years. Because there is a cost for us to join the sheriff's department dispatch, which is defrayed for this next year and the year following and maybe the third year.
3 years, yeah.
So it's not a budgetary impact for us right now. But just for sake of argument, let's say that cost is $80,000 and we don't change anything. 4 years from now, we'll have to come up with an $80,000 in our budget. So what the chief and I and others are looking at is what are the opportunities to, minimize that cost. And so we've looked into regionalizing just police dispatch on the Lower Cape. And we thought we had an opportunity and that didn't pan out, but we can keep up that effort. And then, as he alluded to, the sheriff's department is pursuing a new regional facility, likely somewhere in the Mid-Cape area. And if they were to do that, but that's minimum of 3 to 5 years from now.
At least.
If they have the opportunity to do the police, perhaps we do that. So we're looking for some interim solutions so that we don't incur more costs than what we are now. We'd like to keep it at least neutral. But it goes to some other issues that I'm sure the chief is prepared to discuss is, even if we had the opportunity to send our police, it derives a whole set of new issues about staffing and manning of a police station on a 24/7 basis, which right now we have with our dispatchers there.
Yeah, our police department is always manned by somebody, and very often, especially in the middle of the night, that's by the dispatcher. If you walk in our lobby at 2:30 in the morning, you're met
Somebody
by a
there.
live person that can help you with whatever you need. If we were to regionalize our entire dispatch function, then we have to deal with that dark station problem. Do we allow the front door to be locked with a phone? I don't know how comfortable I am with that, so. But that's a long way down the road to even think about that. We did pursue a couple of other opportunities. They didn't pan out, and the sheriff's department is in the process, almost in the phase of the process where we were on the Lower Cape, where they're at the beginning of looking for a piece of land, doing a feasibility study,
Yeah.
you know, architectural and engineering. I mean, you're talking years and years and years until this gets done, so.
How do the dispatchers and at the police department feel about the change?
It's been interesting. One of my goals and commitments in this process was to keep them completely in the loop. It's change. It's a big change for them. And I didn't want them to feel this was being done behind their back or anything. They do a great job with what we asked them to do. We just asked them to do too much at times, and it overruns them. So there were a lot of questions at the beginning, and then very slowly, each one of them has come to me and said, you know, I had this call last night, and then I had this other call happen on top of it, and you guys are right. You know, this is really hard. This has become almost impossible at times to keep up with. And we don't want to miss, it's actually going to be safer for the first responders as well, because very frequently we could be out at a call and the fire department's talking to the dispatcher on the radio, and a police officer's trying to call the dispatcher and not getting an answer because the dispatcher's talking to the fire department. And they don't want that. The dispatchers want to provide a very high level of service, and they've all come around to that this is going to send the level of service through the roof, and they understand it. We've talked internally a little bit about, what other functions could we use them for in our building? We have body cameras coming in. Is there an opportunity to get, maybe one of our dispatchers that's a little more IT inclined to help us with some of that stuff? There's always accreditation work to do if one of them wanted to help with that. So we have a really good group of people, and they're all on the same team and pulling in the same direction. So we'll work through this. This is a big change for all of us. But I fully believe it's the right thing to do. This is, if we continue down the path we're on with this, something bad could happen, something tragic could happen, and we need to make a change. This is the quickest and best opportunity for that.
Could I ask a question on,
Sure, sorry. I didn't see- Yes.
how will this change be explained to the campus, to the community?
So we're working on that right now. We haven't kept it a secret. We just haven't really come out
Right.
with a mass, advertising or press release or anything about it. I think within the next week or two, you're going to see a joint press release from the sheriff's department and the town of Eastham explaining what we're doing, when we're doing it, why we're doing it. And then, I'm happy to discuss it anywhere at any time. We may do some talks up at the Council on Aging, maybe over at the library, anyone that has any questions about it. I could talk about this all day. I've got stories and scenarios where the dispatch facility has been just overwhelmed with work to do. And I'm happy to talk to anybody about it at any time. But we're just about now to come out with a release to the community and explain the whole thing.
Thank you.
Especially in the summertime, there's multiple accidents at one time.
Exactly.
So who knows how
So,
many calls they get at once.
I can give you a real quick scenario. One of our best dispatchers had a call where there was a structure fire. It was a house on fire. It was confirmed it was on fire. The fire department was there. They were working. They were, mutual aid coming in from other towns. And if we've both been in our dispatch center when that's happening, and it's just mass chaos. There's radio transmissions, there's phone calls, the 911 phone's ringing. At the same time, the 911 phone rang, and it was a gentleman saying that his wife was having a seizure and he wasn't sure if she was breathing. And the dispatcher had to make the decision, do I provide emergency medical dispatch to that caller? Or do I stay on this structure fire where there could be firefighters in danger, there could be someone
People
still
in
in
the
that
house.
house, there could be. She made, in my view, the right decision. She kind of left the fire department alone for a minute and dealt with the medical call, got an ambulance rolling, did the emergency medical dispatch. and it all worked out okay. But that's just kind of a minor example of how bad it can get and how quick it can get. Those calls could have been worse. So it's just, it's things, the technology that's increased, the services we're providing have increased so much over the years that one person doing that job just doesn't work anymore.
And I have a question, given the age of the people that live in town here, it's not like we've got a large number of people that young, middle age, et cetera, et cetera. Does that affect the work that you're involved with? In other words, because there's so many more people 60 and over, so to speak, medical issues and things of that nature occur probably more often than they would if we had a different diversity of age levels here.
I think so. That might be a better question for the fire department, but I think a lot of the work they do is EMS related rather than fire related. Our officers go to all those calls. We go to fire calls and EMS calls regularly. As far as the dispatch goes, I mean, that's the medical calls, especially the more severe ones, can tie them up for a long period of time because they have to stay on the phone with the caller, giving that emergency medical dispatch information, or, you know, it could be a situation where they feel like if they hang up and something changes, you don't want the person to have to call back. They want to know about that right away. So yeah, there are a lot of medical calls, probably somewhat due to the demographic of people that live here. But yeah, I mean, that's what we deal with. I mean, it's just the reality for us. Just, you want me to touch on those budgetary concerns so just a couple budgetary concerns for this change. I mentioned the 911 grants that we receive. So of those grants, the emergency medical dispatch grant, we will no longer receive, but we will no longer need because we won't be doing emergency medical dispatch anymore. The sheriff's department will. The 911 training grant, we will still need to train we will no longer receive that grant. We will need to train our dispatchers, but not to the requirements of state 911 because we won't be doing 911 anymore. So we do have a very small dispatch training budget that we may have to look at in the coming years to continue to train them to be the best police dispatchers that they can be. And the big one is the support and incentive grant, $33,000 for supplies and overtime for our dispatchers. We're still going to need dispatchers in our building 365 days a year, 24 hours a day, which is going to require overtime because there's only 5 of them. They all get time off. And we will no longer receive those funds from state 911. So we're going to have to increase that overtime line at some point to make up for that.
It definitely will be an increase from what's presented in front of you, whether it's the full 30,000 or not. I think we got to flesh that out a little bit.
Yes.
But I mentioned to you earlier this evening, that's one of the bigger ones, and natural resources under the Department of Public Works budget also needs a little bit of attention. The good news is at this moment, we've got the flexibility to add those things without breaking our budget. We're still can be balanced, so it's a matter of finding what's a good spot to land on those things.
The other flexibility this gives us as well is right now, there's only 5 people at our facility, those 5 dispatchers that are legally allowed to answer 911 because you have to be certified to provide that emergency medical dispatch. Once we lose that, the sheriff's department's doing it. We would be able to, I could dispatch because I'm just dispatching for police. So I could, as long as I can answer the phone, use the police radio, I know how to use the records management software, I could dispatch. So it provides us the flexibility where if we end up with 2 of those dispatchers are away on vacation and 1 gets sick suddenly, and we're in that crisis moment where we only have 2 remaining dispatchers that can work, we can supplement with a police officer to kind of keep us going through that situation. Doesn't save us any money because the officers make more money on overtime, but it provides us the management flexibility to kind of make it through a crisis like that.
I have another question. In the past, before the high school started being built, we used the high school for emergency.
It's like you can read my mind.
I'm not sure I can read your mind, but anyway, I know, obviously, we haven't been able to use it. Well, number one, at one point, the generator failed, and we ended up at the library because that was the only place available at the time. Now we're in the middle of revamping the entire high school. And obviously, the library doesn't have overnight accommodations. And I guess something was put together for the elementary school. And where are we? It's my understanding that the gym at the elementary school doesn't have air conditioning, doesn't have a generator. I'm not sure, it's missing something. If we have a storm this weekend,
Mhm.
let's say, and we need people to find a place to go for heat, for food, for
Mhm.
pets, for whatever it is,
Mhm.
what's the current plan?
So the last part of my presentation I had here was the emergency management part of the plan, which is exactly down that road. We are now back in the high school for sheltering purposes, which is the overnight accommodations. The
Mhm.
high school has a brand new enormous generator. You can actually walk inside this thing. There's walkways inside it. It's so big. We've been over there multiple times with our partners from Barnstable County, our local public safety partners, our newly formed CERT team here in Eastham, Citizens Emergency Response Team. And we have a plan now for sheltering back at the high school in the
okay.
new gymnasium and using the cafeteria as well for feeding and there's actually multiple parts of the school we could use for sheltering. So if there was an issue in one, we could go to a different one.
Mhm.
And we've developed a plan for that, which is good. We're back and we're confident that building should be relatively it's brand new, so
Mhm.
it
So
should
it
be
could be
very
used this
reliable.
weekend if it was
Should be used
necessary.
This weekend. yeah.
Okay.
As far as warming centers, our primary warming center will continue to be the library. That's not meant to be overnight accommodations.
Right.
That's just if you need a place to charge your cell phone, if you're getting too hot, you're getting too cold, you can come in for a time. But then there's an end to that, maybe till the next day.
Mhm.
We've done that several
Couple
times.
times.
We are actually very lucky in this town where we have the library, the town hall, the police department, the fire department, the council on aging that have generator power. So if one of those were to fail, we have multiple other options to keep people. I mean,
Locations.
we put people in this room if we needed to. We have a lot of other options
Mhm.
to provide that service if we need to. If it got too bad, we're probably talking about going to the high school and opening up a full shelter anyway, which brings us resources from Barnstable County, the Red Cross, AmeriCorps, all kinds of other agencies.
Okay.
I just wanted to mention our CERT team. I think I talked about this last year. We developed a Eastham CERT, which is Citizens Emergency Response Team. They're a very small group. You might have seen them at town meeting wearing their green vests, helping people direct them through the carnage that was the high school at that time. We use them also at Windmill Weekend to help people with directions around the Windmill Green. And we use them at our drive-through flu clinic that we did down at the Elks with the health department. So I just, I want to mention them. I want to thank them. This is a work in progress. We're developing this. Some other towns have much larger CERT teams, but our group is a good group and they're prepared in a sheltering situation, a storm situation, whether it's a full shelter at the school or a warming center to come and assist with that as well. Which is really one of the big reasons we created that group was to have help with storm.
Because at one point we
emergencies.
had trouble finding people to
Exactly.
help out. I mean, we didn't have the people and
Correct, yes.
yeah.
Which is really why the CERT team became an idea, was to
Yeah.
get a group signed up so that if we have a storm situation, we have a group to help us. That's really all I have.
I just want to commend you on the success of your trailer out there, where you filled it up how many times?
Oh, for the hurricane relief?
Yeah.
Geez, I don't know, was it 3 or 4
Yeah,
times?
before, and then we finally just had to stop. Like,
Good stuff.
It went well. We did it again for Toys for Tots for
Yeah.
Christmas. So yeah, our officers enjoy doing stuff like that, giving back and participating in, whatever the crisis is that's going on at the time. So.
There's one speed thing that's on Nauset Road that doesn't work.
I know.
Why, somebody pay attention to them?
I go by it almost every day.
Oh, I do too. That hasn't worked right since we put it up and I
Yeah.
think it's a programming issue, but I'll put it on my list. Those signs actually I think those signs have done a pretty good job.
Yeah.
If nothing else, it makes people just look at how fast they're going.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
step number one.
Does it record data for you to?
It does not. They
No,
don't.
they're not even the one over by Mary Chase Road?
They don't. You can buy ones that do. It's just they're more expensive and then the labor to go either you got to pay for a cloud service so you can download it, or you got to go out and physically connect to it. And so we opted to go for a higher volume of signs, but a little bit, lesser technology.
Dumber.
Yeah, I wasn't gonna say that.
I just have to say, I walk on Schoolhouse Road and there is one on Schoolhouse Road. And I was shortly after you put it up, I walked down and then I walk up to my house. And all of a sudden I looked at the one because I'm on the left-hand side walking and it had 3 and I'm walking 3 miles an hour.
Mary, I gotta go get my ticket book. I'll be right.
I just thought, oh my God, there's telling me I'm walking 3 miles an hour. Any other questions? Thank you
All right.
both very
You're
much.
welcome. Thanks
Yes,
for having us.
yes, yeah. Good luck with your next hire.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So I don't know if, let me see, I'm just looking at the agenda. And I don't have anything to add under new business or old business. Did you have something?
Yeah, I did have something I wanted to, I don't want to spend a lot of time on it tonight, but I do want to at least give you the news and inform you. I'm gonna share my screen. I'd sent out an email earlier today. So Mary, if you didn't get that, this is new
No,
to you. But it's on screen now.
Steve just gave it to me.
No, there's something.
Oh, that's something else. Oh, okay.
So it's, as you know, we've been talking about wastewater for a time now. And so let's look at column 1, which is what we were hoping our situation was going to be.
Oh, I'm sorry, what?
It's a clean copy of it.
Sorry.
Where we have, right now, we're working with an estimate of $160 million. That may or may not be the right number, but that's what's been in the capital plan, so that's what I went with. So that would translate to at a 0% interest rate from SRF program, $5.3 million per year. How are we going to pay for that? That's a lot of money. Well, we've been stewarding the short-term rental receipts of 1.5 million that we could apply that towards it. If we qualify as an SRF program, under the SRF program, we get 25% subsidy from the Cape and Islands Water Protection Trust. That's 1.3. We've been talking about reducing the CPA surcharge, so this is, requires more fleshing out, and reducing the CPA surcharge and replacing it with what's called a water infrastructure investment infrastructure fund. So that'd be about $600,000. And we've been stewarding debt drop off, which is why you see, the amount of short-term rentals applied to the budget change year over year, because I'm trying to steward what we call debt drop off, which isn't real funding, but basically what it is people are used to paying tax at a certain level, and I'm all things being equal, maintaining it
Instead of
at that
paying
level.
for an earlier debt, you're paying for this debt.
Yes. So that brings you to about $4.6 million, which means that we'd be $700,000 short. And that would, if that were to be the case, that would have to go to the property tax rate, which would cost the median taxpayer in town about $100, which isn't too bad for a $160 million wastewater system. But I didn't include a couple of things. Some other ideas we had is perhaps we could consider some betterments. I don't know that the residential properties could sustain that, but perhaps on the commercial properties, because they do gain a lot of development potential. So maybe we could introduce a betterment program. One of the things I did in another town is suggested a capital surcharge on operating rates. In our case, that's probably not going to work because the operating rate would then be too high. We don't have a lot of participation, whereas this other town had, 20,000 plus people that were participating. So adding a few extra bucks for debt service didn't kill the operating rate. I don't know, we would get in the SRF program under the traditional program subsidies from the SRF. So I put a note down below. You see that we got $14.5 million for the water project, a $130 million water project. So if we got that $14 million, that's worth $475,000 annually in reduced debt service. So that would be significantly eat into that $700,000. And of course, there's other grant opportunities which we'd have to determine. Bottom line is, under what we are hoping to occur, we could do this without impacting the property tax rate to any large extent. So, all that being said, we did get some bad news recently and last week, and we briefed the Capital Projects Committee on Tuesday. And Jackie's talked to each select board member, and I'm sure it'll be a topic of one of their upcoming agendas. For the first time in anyone's recent memory, we are considered a Tier 5 community, meaning we have impaired waterways. We are the first Tier 5 community not to make what's called the intended use plan. And so we have an opportunity to appeal that, which we are going to do. We think we can get enough, you can do it on a point system. We think there's a sufficient additional points for us to obtain that they didn't consider that they ought to. That would get us above the line, so to speak, on the intended use plan. But that's not really the problem. The problem is their list is basically constrained due to their funding. And this is exactly what we've been talking about. There's so many wastewater projects going on the South Coast and Cape Cod that they are becoming constrained in their funding, and they are concerned about losing funding from the federal government. They're all EPA-funded block grants. So it does change our perspective on the timing of wastewater. And when we don't know exactly the direction we're going now, but we'll have to start fleshing this out in the upcoming weeks and bring it to the select board and bring it back to the finance committee. But by way of comparison, that caused me to show these other scenarios now that are on the page. And let's go to the worst case. We don't have any funding available to us from SRF. That takes the project cost and adds a substantial amount of interest. So instead of $160 million of principal, we're paying $268 million of principal and interest. And that's
Almost 100 million more.
so that's $12.4 million of debt service in the first year, decreasing about $240,000 a year for the next 30 years. We could still have the same funding sources, except we wouldn't get the Cape and Islands Water Protection Trust because that trust requires us to be SRF approved, which means that we'd have to come up with $9.1 million on our tax rate, which is over $1,300, and that's just not tenable. And so let's hope, that would be the worst case scenario. I guess I can imagine another worst case scenario. The project comes in at more than 160 million too, right? So it could get a little bit worse. A more likely scenario in the near term, short term would be if we got the points and SRF says, yeah, we can put you on the intended use plan. But we already know they don't have the money. So how do they get the money? Well, instead of charging 0%, they might charge 2.75%, let's say. And so that's what this is based on. And likely we wouldn't get any subsidies. In that scenario, and we're assuming we get fully funded, which they are not guaranteeing at this point. At this, because you can only qualify for up to $50 million a year. At $160 million, we'd need, 3+ years to get fully funded. On our water project, same deal. We only could get up to $50 million a year, but they guaranteed we'd be on the IUP for all the subsequent phases. And so now we've got some uncertainty as to the funding. But for sake of the presentation here, assuming that the whole amount was on SRF, we go from 160 to 226, which is 9.6 million, decreasing about $147,000 a year for 30 years. Short-term rental receipts still apply. Theoretically, our Cape and Islands Water Protection Trust amount would go up because 25% of a bigger number is a bigger number. But then I think they probably start running into problems with their funding plan.
Because they don't have the money either.
So, that is potentially not accurate to say either. But we'd still do the WIF, we'd still do a debt drop off. And now we've got to come up with almost $4 million on the property tax rate, which perhaps is doable at $571. But, we thought we had an easier discussion and sell to upcoming town meeting, and it's not going to be that easy, and there's a lot of uncertainty. So I don't know where that all falls out yet, but in the next few weeks, we're going to have to get some questions answered and come back to the select board and the capital projects committee and yourselves to decide what we're going to do for upcoming town meeting. The plan right now is we are pursuing our appeal with SRF
What's the timing on the appeal aspect?
in March. Happens in March.
I mean, we put together what we want to put together and then we go.
They have an actual hearing.
A hearing?
We go to the
Okay.
hearing. I send them a letter in advance so they can take a look at it. And then we go to the hearing, press our case. I think probably we will, I'm being optimistic. I think we'll get those points and we'll qualify. I'm not optimistic that that means we're getting any money. But at least we're on the list. And that does something for us. And then we are also will be pursuing, unfortunately, it's starting from ground zero, opportunities at the USDA, U.S. Department of Agriculture. Apparently is excited about partnering with us and the state on this project. And they come with an interest charge, so it's not 0%, but that's offset by the fact that it's a 40-year loan instead of a 30-year loan. And they do offer up to a 75% grant, which is basically a debt forgiveness. So that potentially could be that's why we really want to get on the IUP list with SRF. Maybe you can't give us the whole thing, but if we, hit lightning in a bottle and get some good funding from a USDA program, maybe we can still put this all together. So I think we got to keep trying and keep working this, and that's really all I got at the moment. But I wanted you to see that, we had come up with a good plan that I think was going to be a winner, and we're just going to have to keep adjusting and modifying it.
So I have a question back to the implementation of the 1.5%. That's the CPA surcharge. We currently apply 3%, and you're talking about taking that 1.5 of the 3% and putting it towards this versus the CPA.
Yeah, so obviously that requires some work. We got to talk to the CPC, we got to talk to,
Community.
Finance Committee and Select Board.
Right.
And that would be an article at town meeting, so that wasn't necessarily intended for this year.
Oh, because the committee is still interested in the surcharge.
Right.
Right.
So that would be, that wouldn't the debt service requirements, even if we got approved this year, wouldn't be starting until I think it was 2029, and I calculate. So we had several years to line this up. So it wasn't anything that was going to happen immediately. So that's why we haven't really been going to the CPC too much yet about that, other than letting you know that maybe that's a thing.
Mhm. Because this past year, we've taken in $1 million too with the 3%. So you've taken half of that is the 6.
Rich, the only thing you may want to add is the design is not stopping, it's continuing.
Oh, right. That's a good point. So, we had this experience in Yarmouth. Yarmouth, just before I'd gotten there in 2012, had a 90% design for a wastewater plan. And it did not go well at their town meeting, got soundly defeated. It ended up costing them, I think at that time, the plan was 90 million. And now they just got their plan passed. I had done a ton of work on it, set up a funding plan and financing plan. Oh yeah, we redesigned some of the phasing. Instead of doing 3 different separate parts of town, we did just one long main that went the length of Route 28, which made a lot of sense to get all the high flows from the commercial sector. So it did a lot of work, and in 2020, just after I left, it went to town meeting, and it passed. And they're just starting it now, but it went from about a $90 million plan to a $230 million plan. But at any rate, it passed, and they were able to utilize that 90% design from 2012 and just tweak it in that last 10% for the new phasing and all that stuff. But all the measurements, all the ground, the elevations and the angles of the pipes and all that, the locations of where pump stations were needed were all going to be pretty much the same. So we've got money from town meeting from last year. That effort has been underway, and it's going to continue for the better part of this year. And we'll finalize, and we're 30% at the end of March, I think is right. So we will keep marching on that and get this design. And I think the key is, and this was the same in Yarmouth, when the community was ready and when the opportunities arose, they were ready to go. And so, it's the old term being shovel ready. So, if the USDA comes through and says they want to give us 100 million at 2% over 40 years, and by the way, we forgive up to 75% of that, well, that would be our opportunity to go. So, we want to be ready for something like that. And that's what Chatham was in that position, was a different grant program. I forget what it was in 2008, whatever the recovery plan from 2008, 2009 was. Chatham tapped into that and got a bunch of money for their wastewater system. Peter, did you have a question?
Roy, you have a question?
Yes, Rich, how comfortable are you with that $160 million estimate?
I'm comfortable that it's in the ballpark. I don't know that that's the number. That's why we're going through the design work. We're supposed to have a better refined estimate with this 30% design.
What percent are we at now?
0%, conceptual.
Just conceptual, okay. The layperson's question, what do you mean by betterments?
Oh, actually, I forgot to show you that page. So let me just share my screen again. This is without any betterments applied. This is perhaps, with this shaded here, what a betterment might do for us. So a betterment is you charging the property owner some determinative value for some perceived benefit of receiving whatever service you're giving them. And in this case, it's sewer, but it could be water, it could be sidewalks, it could be roads, it could be some, economic development district. And you want to charge those people that are receiving benefit for that. So sometimes, let's say, let's keep it simple on the Eastham scale. Let's say some neighborhood off Herringbrook wanted to have sidewalks on their street. Well, rest of the town isn't going to pay for it. They don't want to have to do that. If they're going to get sidewalks, why don't I get sidewalks? But one way they could do that is, well, if all those residents want to pay for it, yeah, we can put in sidewalks. Well, how would they pay for it? We charge them a betterment. And a betterment typically would go on their tax bill, and it goes anywhere from, say, 5, typically more like 10, up to 20 years would be on your tax bill, and just be added to your property tax every year for the next 20 years, and it usually comes with a small interest rate, either 1%, 2%, or 3%. And so, in this case, I don't know that the residential properties, they certainly will be benefiting, and of course, the whole community benefits from cleaning up the nitrogen issue. But in this case, I think there might be a case to be made, and that's what I wanted to work through the capital project committee with a little bit, that a commercial property benefits more than a residential property because of the potential the development potential. And so, and this is actually the case for why we've been waiting for wastewater for development of Northeastham, is because if you don't need to commit, $3, $4, $8 million to on-site wastewater treatment, not only spending that money, but taking up all that space, that means you could have more housing units or office space or commercial space, whatever it is you're developing on your parcel, instead of having it take up space with a wastewater treatment plant. And so that's worth something. And when we were in Yarmouth, this is what I introduced, and I went and surveyed. Of course, it's a much bigger scale, but you think of some place like the Cove of Yarmouth, and I went and talked to them, and they got a lot of units, restaurants, all kinds of facilities there. And they paid a lot of money every year to maintain their own on-site treatment facility, and it wasn't doing what it needed to do. So when you go to them and say, hey, would you be willing to pay a $400,000 betterment? It sounds like a lot of money. They're like, where do I sign up? Because that was going to save them money in the long run. So now in our case, you think of a place like the Sheridan or any of these big, Ocean Park Inn, any of these big sites that could be redeveloped. There's a lot of value in not having to put your own on-site treatment plant. So there's 89 properties in our proposed sewer system, 89 commercial properties. And so what's the reasonable amount? And I just put in here, if we could get, say, $2.5 million out of those properties as a betterment, and collected that over 20 years, I'm not even factoring any interest or anything like that. And that's 2.5 divided by 20 is $125,000 a year of payment that we could apply towards our debt service of the system. So that's what that's all about.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions on the discussion regarding the wastewater?
And
Is-
Jackie, was working on a town manager's report today, so I think that'll be forthcoming.
Is there a select board meeting next Monday?
No, because it's the holiday week.
Yeah,
It's
Oh, oh,
President's Day.
Okay, so then,
but I'll make sure you get it.
okay, if Kayla could, because I've told Kayla in the past, just send it to me and I'll,
He's out, so.
and I'll take care of it like I've done in the past.
Okay.
Okay. So I don't have anything else. I'm looking at the agenda. Is there anything else that anybody would like to discuss, that's on the agenda? Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Roy? Do I have a second to adjourn? Steve, I'll take Steve. All in favor of adjourning? 1, 2, Peter, Roy, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Let me see, 7, I'm missing, let me see, I thought I'm missing, that's 7-0.
And Bob and Pat.
Kate's not here,
Pat.
that's 8, and, oh, Paul isn't here, that's 9, 7-0, and I have, 5:45.